Marcus Green woke before dawn, as he always did. The ranch had a rhythm, one he'd inherited from his father and grandfather before him. Cows needed feeding, fences needed mending, and the land always asked for sweat before it gave back. He stood on the porch, coffee steaming in his hand, admiring the fields he'd fought so hard to keep alive. But something was wrong. His eyes squinted against the morning haze. There it was, glinting steel, running long and unbroken. A fence. A tall, chain-link monstrosity surrounding his entire ranch. Marcus set his mug down, jaw tightening. Yesterday, the horizon had been open. Today he was caged. He stormed down the gravel path toward the gate. At the far end, a heavy lock hung on new metal bars. A laminated notice flapped in the wind, by order of Maple Creek HOA, restricted access for community protection. Marcus felt his stomach churn. His ranch wasn't part of Maple Creek's HOA. His grandfather had bought this land decades before any suburban cookie-cutter houses appeared nearby. It was sovereign. It was his. By noon, Marcus was in the HOA office, chest heaving with rage. Behind a polished desk sat Richard Cole, the newly elected HOA president, a man with slicked-back hair, pastel shirts, and the smug air of someone who thought power made him untouchable. "Richard," Marcus said, slamming the notice on the desk. "What the hell is this?" Richard didn't even flinch. "Ah, Marcus. Sit down. This was a board decision. Your land is, how do I put it? Open. Doesn't fit the community's image. We fenced it in for safety. Property values, you understand. My land isn't part of your HOA," Marcus snapped. Richard gave a mocking smile. "True. But the board decided it still affects us." "Don't worry, we'll keep the key. You just focus on your little farm. Marcus clenched his fists so hard his knuckles went white. This land wasn't little. It was generations of his family's blood, sweat, and dignity. On the drive home, Marcus's chest burned. The fence wasn't just metal. It was theft. It was humiliation. And Richard Cole had made one mistake, thinking Marcus would bow. The days that followed were worse than Marcus imagined. Feed trucks refused to enter, citing restricted access. Mail carriers left notices that they couldn't deliver.
Ow.
Neighbors stopped by the fence just to gawk, whispering about how long Marcus would last before selling out. It was a siege, plain and simple. The HOA wasn't just fencing him in. They were starving him out. One evening, Marcus sat in his kitchen, staring at old family photos. His grandfather stood proudly in black and white, arms crossed before the same land now behind steel. His father's hands were calloused from years of plowing and planting. They hadn't endured poverty and prejudice just for him to roll over, but he was tired. Each day felt like a battle he couldn't win. One night, while repairing the barn latch, Marcus noticed a cluster of HOA board members outside the fence. They stood with wine glasses in hand, pointing at his fields like tourists at a zoo. A woman's voice carried in the breeze. "If he sells, we could finally expand the golf course." Marcus's jaw locked. His family's legacy dismissed as nothing more than prime real estate for leisure. Later that night, his old friend Elijah stopped by. They sat on the porch under a quilt of stars. "They're trying to break you, Marcus," Elijah said quietly. "But maybe you need to play smarter. Look at that gate. One key. Whoever controls it, controls everything," Marcus frowned. "What are you saying?" Elijah's eyes gleamed. "Keys aren't just metal. They're power. You find out who owns the property under that gate, and you'll find your way out of this cage." The words echoed in Marcus's head long after Elijah left. He didn't know how yet, but Elijah was right. If the HOA thought they held all the power, maybe the game wasn't over. Maybe it had just begun. The next morning, Marcus began his hunt. At the county records office, he combed through property maps and legal documents. Hours passed before he found it. The thin strip of land where the gate sat. His heart skipped. The gate wasn't technically HOA land. It belonged to a single private owner, a reclusive man who'd moved out years ago. The property had been sitting unpaid on taxes, which meant it was up for auction. Marcus leaned back in his chair, stunned. The HOA had fenced him in but built their power on borrowed ground. The very strip of land they depended on wasn't theirs. That night, Marcus barely slept. Memories of his father's words returned. Land is freedom. Don't let anyone take yours. When the auction day came, Marcus wore his father's old watch, a reminder of the legacy he carried. He sat in the courthouse, nerves jangling as the bidding began. HOA representatives sat across the room, smug and certain. The bidding war was fierce. The HOA threw money like confetti, trying to outbid him. But Marcus came prepared. He sold his late-model truck, cashed out savings, and even borrowed against future cattle sales. Every bid was a knife, but he held steady. At last, the gavel came down. Sold to Mr. Marcus Green. The HOA reps went pale. Richard Cole's smug grin dissolved into shock. Marcus walked out with shaking hands, clutching the papers that made him owner of the strip of land and the only gate key. Asterisk, the shift in power was instant. Now, every HOA member who needed access to the surrounding trails, the maintenance crews, even delivery trucks, they all had to go through Marcus. The board called an emergency meeting, demanding he honored the spirit of community. Marcus laughed in their faces. "You fenced me in like an animal," he said coldly. "But you built your fence on land you didn't own. Now if you want through that gate, you'll play by my rules." Richard exploded. "You can't do this. You'll ruin everything." Marcus leaned forward, eyes sharp as steel. "It's funny, that's exactly what you tried to do to me." The HOA members seethed, but they had no choice. Their iron grip had snapped like brittle glass. The man they tried to cage now held the only key to their freedom. For Marcus, it wasn't just victory, it was vindication. Each time he slid that key into the lock, he felt generations of his family standing behind him. Asterisk, weeks later. The neighborhood dynamic had flipped completely. HOA members who once mocked him now came politely to his door, asking for access. Some begged, some tried to bribe him. Richard even threatened lawsuits. But every lawyer told him the same thing. Marcus was within his rights. The same fence that was meant to humiliate Marcus had become his weapon. One evening, standing by the gate, Marcus's hand rested on the cool metal key. His father's voice echoed in his mind. "Land is freedom. Don't let anyone cage you." He smiled. The HOA had tried to break him. Instead, they'd made him stronger. They thought the fence would strip away his dignity, but all it did was prove what Marcus already knew. His family's blood ran deeper than any board's bylaws. As the sun set, he locked the gate with a final click.
Ow.
The sound rang like a declaration. HOA had fenced him in, but Marcus Green had bought the fence, and the freedom that came with the only gate key.